So I used to like Christmas. I'd fly home to sunny Phoenix, eat some really good food, and then get back on the plane before anything went wrong. Then in December of 1999, I made the mistake of moving back home to Central Phoenix. And I moved in right next door to a pack of meth heads. Now they had the telltale habits of meth head neighbors, which are, number one, never finish your automotive projects, and leave the rotting corpses of the cars littering your front yard. Number two, build high fences made of plywood and doors, propped up just high enough to keep the whole mass of oil cans and mufflers and Twinkie wrappers from toppling over. And then there was the pile that they started right next to my house. It started out as just this innocent little patch of lawn clippings, but eventually it grew to this chest-high pile of just the most amazing things. Asphalt chunks, car bumpers, drywall pieces, diapers, human hair, dinner forks, packing peanuts, and these big wads of masking tape that were about 2 feet high and kind of looked like tumbleweeds. And then there were the cops that would come raid the meth head's house. And they'd go in there dressed for a war. They had like helmets and bulletproof vests. And one time I saw this troop of them charging over towards my car. So I went running out there yelling about my rights and warrants. And the four of them just swung their rifles around at me. And one of them said, "We don't need a warrant." After that, I pretty much stayed inside my house. But then the meth heads started running this generator. It was this nasty old generator, and it sounded like a never-ending fart. Like someone was revving a go-kart right there in my own kitchen. So basically, I had to go out there. And the day that I went out there, there was this snotty group of neighborhood people wearing little plastic gloves and trying to clean up the pile. But the pile had gotten so out of hand at this point that they looked like they were just patting it, trying to smooth it out into a more rounded shape. And right as I walked up to them, the meth head came up and thought I was one of the neighborhood do-gooders. And so when I told him that he needed to turn that generator down, he just glared at me with menace and hostility. And he said, "Well, I guess you'd better call it a day then." To which I said, "I can't, my house is right there." And he scratched his chin and he cocked his head. And he told me that he would stop running the generator, and that if I had any neighborly complaints, I should take them to him and not the police. And when I told him that I was afraid to come over to his house because I'd had those rifles pointed at me, he said, "Oh, that was just about an outstanding traffic ticket." So 2 weeks passed, and Christmas Day came, and the generator was still running. And I spent the day with my family at my older brother Bill's house, and everything was going fine until Bill pulled me aside and let me know that my younger brother Joe had started to shoot heroin. So basically it broke my heart to spend Christmas watching my 27-year-old brother stare like a zombie at his chocolate Santa. And, maybe somebody a little bit stronger would have confronted the situation a little more directly. But I decided the best approach was to be the first one to leave. And I walked out to my car thinking, great, I can get out of here. And the first thing I noticed is there's like this 3-foot dent in the passenger door of my car. And the cops get there, and sure enough, they find the paint from my car on the bumper of the car of the grandmother that lives right next door to my brother. And the grandmother comes out of her house and she lies to the cops, and she gets her kids to lie to the cops, and then she gets her grandkids to lie to the cops. And by the time I leave, I'm completely demoralized, and I'm driving away, and in my rearview mirror, I could see these people, the grandmother with the 2 grandchildren under either arm, one little bastard sticking out his tongue, the other little guy flipping me off. So I go home, and I get there, and what do I see? But leaning right against the back wall of my house is a toilet. And I think to myself, well, at least I know where to go about this one. And I go over, I knock on the meth head's door, and I grab him, and I take him over so that we can both stand there and stare at the toilet for a minute. And then I tell him, you know, could you take this thing? And he said, to the pile? And he reached down and he cradled the toilet in both arms, and I followed him through the baby dolls and the pamper boxes and the rusted cheese graters to the top of the pile. And I said, you know, if you find out who did this, and he said, oh, we'll open a big can of whoop ass on him. And I thought, whoop ass? That's the nicest thing that anybody said to me all day. And so I told him about my Christmas, about the hit-and-run grandma and the lying grandkids and my brother, the chocolate Santa zombie. And the meth head dropped the toilet, and it rolled down the pile through the carpeting, the mini blinds to the bottom of the pile. And he looked at me and he shook his head. You can't judge humanity, he said, by the actions of a wretched minority. And so I stood there with my friend, and the air conditioners, or the toilet settled next to a busted air conditioner. And there I was with my feet firmly planted in the mud and the crud of Central Phoenix. Merry Christmas. Welcome home.